and Fleece Main line available in turn number 2. So I think it's going to be a rough road ahead here for Colin. It's not impossible, just a little improbable. As both players take a look at their opening hands, let's not forget, after the first game, we'll come back to the booth. We'll do our first of 3 trivia questions this morning, as usual. The first one will be for 3 months. And we'll announce the winner at the conclusion of our quarterfinal round. That's correct. Quarterfinals, not semifinals here. We've got to do all 3 elimination rounds this morning.
Yeah, so you're right. So we have Chilbert on the play here. This is the 4-5 matchup. And he's starting off on Boros Guildgate. So we're just going to trade some tap lands. This is, like I said, if he has an Ash Zealot, it gets about 2, it's worth about 2 damage in this matchup. After that's probably going to run into Fleece Main Lion or we have
even Voice.
Even Voice.
I think Voice would be interesting in chump blocking, yeah. There's a Mutavault and just going to pass the turn back. Will Chilbert. So representing a card like Lightning Strike or Magma Jet at this point. We'll see if Blackmor has something to put on his second turn because he is the aggressor in this matchup. Let's not forget. There's an experiment one to get started.
And Chilbert with a lot of lands right now. You see in his hand he has 3 more mountains along with another Mutavault. He actually only has 2 burn spells. It's War Leader's Helix and Searing Blood. So yeah, and a draw of Temple Garden, or Sacred Foundry. That's his 7th land for the game.
Wow. Well, there's Searing Blood to take care of Experiment 1, so that's actually a pretty good turn there. Kills a creature and does deal 3 damage. Now, Searing Blood can be pretty good in this matchup. Sometimes it'll be poor because of some of the cards it lines up against, but if he's able to kill a creature early with that, things are looking good. The thing that's tough here for Chilbert is that on the second turn he played a Mutavault and he had nothing to do with that mana, no Magma Jet or Lightning Strike.
Yeah, and there's even some incidental hate here for Chilbert. If you look at, Soldier of the Pantheon, first of all, it's a pretty good clock against Chilbert. The guy will probably get in for 6, maybe even 8 damage. On top of that, Chilbert plays cards like War Leader's Helix. These are cards that actually Blackmor will gain life when he plays.
Yeah. There is a Bramaz. This is probably the hardest card for Chilbert to beat. Now, War Leader's Helix is a card, and that can actually kill that. And you do mention the fact that Soldier does get to gain a life off of that, so long as Blackmor does remember the trigger. But Bramaz is actually going to bite the dust here, so that's a win there for Chilbert because he has to have Helix on that turn.
Right, he has to have Helix on that turn. On any turn it will kill Bramaz, but otherwise there'll be cats left over. So Chilbert's keeping Blackmor's board in check. However, that's not really the goal in this matchup. Chilbert needs to be making forward progress on the life total, and if he's spending all his time burning creatures, then eventually cards just like this Soldier of the Pantheon will end up swinging for, 6, 8, 10 damage.
A couple of copies of Experiment 1. A Temple Garden going to come into play tapped, and across comes a Soldier of the Pantheon. Going to knock Chilbert down to his original 20. However, Blackmor has a beautiful board position, and he's holding an Advent of the Worm in his hand to evolve those Experiment 1s and put on the battlefield actually a creature that Chilbert is really going to have some serious difficulty beating, as here come the copies of Mutavault into the red zone.
Yeah, and I think the advantage for Blackmor here is that, he's at 13 right now, entering his 5th turn. And though Chilbert has an army of Mutavaults, and they're pretty strong right now, once Blackmor starts getting his, aggressive draws going here, this is like a 2-turn, 3, maybe 2-turn clock.
Yeah, the green-white deck can close out really quickly. Blackmor just drew a Soldier of the Pantheon this turn, so if he does have the necessary mana to cast both that and Advent of the Worm, it's a pretty scary turn. And he's just going to cast Advent right now before damage is dealt, so Evolve trigger is going to happen. It's going to be an attack here for 6, and Chilbert's going to go down to 14.
Yeah, it looks like Blackmor has double Advent to the Worm, so we're going to see another 5/5 trample next turn. Remember, that swings for 6. The next one is for 11, 12, only 13, so it's not lethal. Chilbert will be at 1. So he has probably 2 turns to fire out off a lethal salvo of burn, but it looks like right now the only salvo he has is more lands. He has 4 remaining in his hand.
Yeah, the only spell that he actually has is a copy of Lightning Strike. Mutavault's a powerful card, don't get me wrong, but it's not that good. It does not take down Advent of the Worm.
Yeah, I talked about this yesterday when we were watching Chilbert playing, that he really is, a combo deck of the style that he needs to resolve 7 spells from the course of the game. He's only 2 in right now, and the Mutavaults are helping, but I would say he's not at that threshold yet.
Blackmor, no interest in blocking one of those Mutavaults, so he's going to go down to 9. He'll untap all of his creatures. He'll be taking a draw here in just a moment. Not sure exactly what he picked up, but it did look like a spell.
And Blackmor has an interesting decision this turn. If he swings the team, he can put Chilbert down to 1. However, because 1's not 0, I imagine we'll only see a partial attack on Blackmor's side. As long as the attack next turn is lethal, you don't need to make it more lethal. You'd rather keep back some number of creatures on defense. It'll be interesting to see how many creatures he decides to push here.
And he is going to go with everybody. So I'm kind of in the camp of view where this isn't exactly a lethal attack no matter what he does, because Admiral of the Worm's going to come down here, and Double Evolve's going to take place. So you've got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 isn't 14. And I don't think this is going to come back to actually hurt Blackmor, but...
Yeah, you may want a second defender here. You know, the attack next turn will still be lethal, even if you leave another guy back.
It was going to be a 2-turn scenario either way. Lightning Strike's going to go upstairs here. Blackmor's going to go down to 6. You see Chilbert is at 1.
Yeah, I mean, right now...
If Chilbert draws a Boros Charm, he wins.
Right. You're giving Chilbert more outs.
Yeah. Ash Zealot was actually the draw, because what he could have done there is fire up 2 Mutavaults. One will get through, and then Boros Charm,
Yeah. Well, actually, it's not lethal
that's
because
true.
the Soldier of the Pantheon.
Yeah, that's true, actually. So long as Blackmor actually remembered the trigger, it would not be lethal.
Lightning Strike would be lethal. There you go.
No, not even Lightning Strike, because he goes from 6 to 4.
Oh, you're absolutely right. He'd be at 1.
It'd have to be Boros Charm, and Blackmor would have to forget the trigger.
All right, how about Shock? Shock would do it.
Shock would do it. Shock would do it.
So we see here where there's 1 man up, Blackmor's going to go down to 2. And if Chilbert has that Shock, he will have stolen a game 1.
It's unfortunate for him because the card that he does have in his hand is an Ash Zealot, which is much too late to the party. And so after the attack, Blackmor does block with the Advent of the Worm, and Colin Chilbert will concede the game. So Jason Blackmor is going to win game number 1 here. Green-white aggro up a game over red-white burn. We're going to take a look at the sideboards in just a moment, but we're going to bring it back to the booth first because we have our first of 3 trivia giveaways here. It's going to be for 3 months. Do you want to do the rules, or should I do the rules?
I'll go ahead with the rules of the game. The rules of the game, if you haven't watched us before, is that we will be giving away 3 months, then 6 months, then a year's worth of Star City Premium in the top 8, top 4, and finals of both our Standard and Legacy Open. As we're in our Standard Open, that means we're giving that away right now. Cedric will be asking you a question, and you have to tweet the correct answer with the hashtag SCG Premium. You see it at the bottom of your screen. You have until the end of the entire top 8 to tweet your answer, but after the last top 8 match is concluded, we will randomly pick one of the correct answers, and that player will win 3 months of Star City Games Premium. Remember, though, you do need to be following at SCG Live to be eligible to win.
All right, my friends, first question this morning. We'll take a look at Jason Blackmor's deck list as he is up a game here. He's got a couple of spells to go along with all of these creatures and way to pump them up. The one I'm looking for in particular is the one that actually protects creatures from dying. It's a 3 of in his main deck, and if you can actually name this 1 mana instant that can protect a creature from dying, hashtag your answer with the hashtag of SCG Premium, and make sure you're following at SCG Live. We'll announce the winner again at the conclusion of our quarterfinal round, and it's about accuracy, not speed. So it's not a big rush because the winner will be announced a little further down the road, even though we do have an aggressive top 8 here. So it might not take as long as it normally does, as there's only 1 Esper deck. Sorry, buddy. Only 1.
There only needs to be 1 deck to win a tournament.
That's true. That's true. We're going to head back to the match. We'll take a look at the sideboards here. We're going to start with Colin Chilbert's. He's on your right. He's got 4 Fire Drain Crusaders, 3 Vishnu First Blades, 2 Blind Obedience, 2 Chain of the Rocks, 4 Satyr Fire Dancers. What do you like there?
Well, as we saw before against the aggro decks, Satyr Fire Dancer is pretty important to this matchup. We saw there Blackmor was able to get creatures on the board very fast so that Chilbert had to be burning creatures the whole time. You know, if, say, for example, Chilbert was able to fire that War Leader's Helix at Blackmor to take out the Burmaz, that would have been enough damage to win the game. So Chilbert will be using the 4 Satyr Fire Dancers. On top of that, I'd imagine we see cards like Chain to the Rocks. It's really good against removing creatures, and there are some creatures like Burmaz that simply demand a removal spell when Jason plays them.
Yeah, I mean, Satyr Fire Dancer seems like the most important card. And it's impossible for Blackmor to actually get off of the table, so I imagine Chilbert will be... There's even a chance he mulligans aggressively to try to find that card. As on Blackmor's side, he has 2 Mistcutter Hydras, 2 Skylashers, 3 copies of Unflinching Courage, yikes, 2 Last Breath, 2 Plummet, Reborn Defenses, 2 copies of Unravel the Aether, and a Glare of Heresy. Unflinching Courage is pretty obvious. The one that I actually kind of like here, though, is Last Breath, because 1, it gets the opportunity to kill any of the creatures in Chilbert's deck, and 2, while it might not come up a ton, you can target your own creature and gain 4 life.
Right, and so Last Breath has some utility, and I think the question really is how many cards does Blackmor have that he doesn't like in the matchup? Certainly, I'd say the cards like Spear of Heliod, Ajani Caller of the Pride will probably not be very many damage in this matchup, and I could see him wanting just a cheaper spell or a spell with more utility. I think Unflinching Courage will certainly be boarded in, but I wouldn't be surprised to see something like Last Breath or even Skylasher be boarded in just because it's cheaper.
Yeah, oftentimes, you know, Advent of the Worm is a card that's a little bit interesting in this matchup because It's a little slow, but at the same time, it closes the game out so fast. It doesn't die to War Leader's Helix. It's very hard to Chain of the Rocks because it is an instant. You almost want to cut that card because you want something cheaper, but you also kind of want to leave it in because it is so good at closing out games, and it's so good against this deck.
Yeah, it's the kind of card that you really wouldn't mind having one of. The second one is probably not too relevant. I mean, we just did see him win with 2 of them.
Yeah.
But I do think his attack was probably lethal without the second one as well.
Yeah, I don't think he needed the second one to win a game. I think the first one really does change the game dramatically. You know, evolving experiment ones and just attacking for 5 against burn is a lot of damage. Again, can't kill with a War Leader's Helix. It's going to take 2 spells to kill that. Chain of the Rocks isn't going to catch it right away, so it's probably going to get in for 5 points every single time. Just a really good card in the matchup. It is just a touch slow. You know, for example, if there was Elvish Mystic here, I would love Advent of the Worm.
Right. I think it's the kind of thing that you might want to cut down to 3 of or 2 of, just so that you don't draw double Advents. But that said, having 1 in your hand is a nice inclusion.
Chilbert's going to be on the play. He's going to show a hand of a lot of lands.
Oh, wow. Well, it has a Boros Charm in it.
I would keep it.
It's a 1/5 of the way there.
Well, you see, if you have 6 lands, chances are you won't draw another one. That's how that works, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's really unlikely that you would draw any more lands. You have almost all of them in your hand.
That's an easy keep. It's going to send it back. We'll see if Blackmor has any interest in keeping his hand. Of course, if we do have any other match results for you guys or updates to those matches, we will let you guys know as soon as we do know. Of course, we have our backup match here, Sandro Bernabe playing Gabriel Kosagiomi. That's Black-White mid-range versus Esper. You've got Michael Edgar and Nicholas Schoolcraft in the Mono Black Devotion Mirror. And then Aaron Barrett with his Niagara deck playing against Robert Rivero with Red-White Burn, the other Burn player, with another tough draw here in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, I see Blackmor keeping his hand. It looks like his hand is also a little land heavy, but it does have 4 lands and an Advent of the Worm in it. So even though it's land heavy, it's going to be able to make great use of the resources as long as he has creatures to work his way up to Advent of the Worm in the early game. But I do think that right now the pressure is on Chilbert to see whether or not he can find one of those Satyr Fire Dancers in the matchup.
Yeah, I think he honestly has to. I think he has the mulligan aggressively for that card because it is so good in the matchup. It's also a card that does a pretty nice job of undoing a mulligan because it does get to go upstairs and kill creatures as well. So I think it's easily his most important card after sideboard. And while the burn deck doesn't mulligan great, I think it's a card that can actually undo a mulligan in this situation. So let's see if he can find one. He's taking his time drawing those 6 cards. Let's see if he can find a Fire Dancer. I think he's happy. There's a mountain past the turn back over to Blackmor, who takes a draw. You did mention he's got a lot of lands in his hand. He also has some Unflinching Courage, too.
Okay, so the Blackmor does not have very many spells, but the ones he has are very important. That said, Chilbert has some of the more important cards of his own as we see a turn 2 Satyr Fire Dancer for him.
Again, I feel like easily the most important card in the matchup for him after sideboard. I'm sure if he knew he was playing against green-white a lot over the course of the day, he would have started that card in place of Astel. As it stands, he does draw 1. He's actually able to attack with 1. A little risky, just a touch, because Selesnya Charm does exist, but chances are he does have an instant to actually cast to kill the Selesnya Charm token.
Yeah, and there was a chance here that, I was going to say, Blackmor kept being very aggressive with his keep. He's turned 3 Spear of Heliod. So I think it's just Advent of the Worm and Unflinching Courage. He kept his hand just on the strength of those 2 cards.
Well, those 2 cards are pretty gosh darn good in the matchup. So Magma Jet's going to resolve. Blackmore's going to go down to 17. Chilbert does a little scry action. You see a Temple of Triumph picked up for his draw step. In for 1. It's going to put Blackmor down to 16.
Yeah, no, there's some interesting things. Blackmor on that turn 3 looks like he drew a Fleece main line, but he opted to play Spear first. Now, normally you'd want to play a creature first, even though it's not as mana efficient. But I want to say what he's doing here is he's trying to play around that Satyr Fire Dancer by preemptively making his creatures too big to burn out.
Yeah, and I like that a lot. This play here, he's going to play Fleeceman and probably Voice in the same turn. I like this a little bit less. I like sticking with the Advent of the Worm plan and then just suiting it up the next turn.
Yeah, certainly when you have 2 Spear of Heliod, you get rewarded for playing 2 creatures. And you see there Magma Jet in Chilbert's hand, stranded thanks to Spear of Heliod.
Another thing, too, I guess Voice is a little bit frustrating just because Chilbert can't fire stuff off on Blackmor's turn to kill it, so he's not going to be as efficient as he would like to be. He actually has to untap, take a draw, and go from there. Now, if he picked up a Chain of the Rocks, that would be a big deal to get that Voice Resurgence out of the way. But now he has to go Boros Charming instead, fire that off, take care of the Fleece main line. Again, he has to do all these things on his main phase because Voice Resurgence text would give Blackmor an Elemental token, which is a nightmare for Chilbert.
Yeah, in the case of Fleece main line, Chilbert can't actually let that creature become monstrous either. So, he firing up Burrow Charm really at that last opportunity because as soon as Blackmor hits land number 5, Fleeceman will become unkillable.
Yep, he has to kill it now. Chilbert waiting pretty patiently here. Voice being a 3-3 right now is actually pretty important too, because now he doesn't have to worry about shock. And so the one thing he can do is he can actually just say, all right, I've got an Unflinching Courage, just picked up another copy of that into the worm. And he says, I can actually just suit this up and go to work if I'd like. It'll be a 5-5-2, which is a sweet spot here for the burn spells.
All right, so we see land 5 there. Chilbert has taken Blackmor down to 12. He's still kept his life total at 20, so things are good for him right now. We do see a pair of Advent of the Worms in Blackmor's hand, though. So once the beats start coming in, they're going to be coming in quite heavily, quite hard. So we have a swing for 3 here. Yeah, swing down tap, make a 6/6 trampler for 4.
Yeah, I think he's being a little... I think he could be more aggressive. I don't want to give Blackmor any time. Like, even if I suit that Voice Resurgence up with an Unflinching Courage, hit him for 5, gain my 5, then my creature gets chained to the rocks, I think I'm still okay with that. Just because gaining 5 is basically, removing 2 cards from Chilbert's hand.
Well, and I like that because it's, even if he can deal with Voice of Resurgence, it's unlikely he has removal for Voice of Resurgence and 2 worm tokens. So that life gain just buys enough time for your worms to swing.
Chilbert plays his 4th land. So we'll see what he can find on this turn. Going to be an interesting one. He's taking a look at his hand. He does have Chain of the Rocks. He probably wants to take care of Voice. But Chain of the Rocks is really kind of working overtime in this matchup because there are a lot of things he wants to kill. Right, and he is going to take care of Voice, it looks like now.
This is going to open him up to that Unflinching Courage on the worm token.
Which may have been the plan all along, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, that's a 1-2 punch that's going to be pretty difficult for Chilbert to deal with. I don't think he can in his hand. See, the worm made an end step here. We'll see whether or not Blackmor decides to make a second worm or to go ahead and enchant that worm.
Suit it up. Suit it up.
I mean, you have to think, an 8/8 trample lifelink is pretty good in this matchup.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy for me to say because I can see both players' hands, but suit it up. Fleece main line the draw here, too. He can play 2 spells in 1 turn. It would be so hard for me not to just suit that thing up, play Fleece main line, and move forward. No, unless I'm misreading his hand, he doesn't have Unflinching Courage, which I'm pretty sure he does have.
Yeah, the one thing you could do is you could try to wait and monster the Fleece main and suit that up, but that's too much mana and too much time. So right now he's going to swing with the 6/6 worm and not give it Unflinching Courage.
I mean, it's realistic that he could die.
Yes.
That's the thing. Like, if he dies with Unflinching Courage in his hand, it's not the best spot to be in.
Yeah, we have an end-step Magma Jet, dealing 2 to Fleece main line. I don't think he has the shock to finish it off. But it is free.
Yeah, 2 cards going to go to the bottom here. And there is the shock, actually.
I stand corrected. He does have the shock to finish it off. Yeah, and we see now Blackmor down to 8. This is becoming a real concern that he may not get to untap with that worm, and he may not get to give a lifelink.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine what kind of game we're looking at here? It's like a disaster if he just dies this turn and he's had Unflinching Courage in his hand the entire game. Because Unflinching Courage, I feel like at this point, he's kind of overvaluing. Like, it's obviously very, very potent in the matchup, but it can be looked at as like 3 mana gain 5 or 3 mana gain 7, and that's it.
Yeah, I think Blackmor is going to be okay. You see there's 5 points of burn in Chilbert's hand, but that's not 6.
Yep.
So if he goes for Unflinching Courage this turn, Chilbert will not have an answer for it, and that should be enough to close things out for Blackmor. Not to mention that he has 12 power worth of trampling creatures. So with that, Chilbert actually is dead on the board. He's dead to turn both creatures sideways,
well, now
even before Unflinching Courage.
Yeah, he's going to drop Unflinching Courage now. Chilbert's going to take a look at his hand. That's a Magma Jet. He says deal damage over to that. That's fine. So that's 2 of the necessary 6. And that's an extension of the hand. Jason Blackmor with green-white aggro and a very favorable pairing for him in the top 8. Defeats Colin Chilbert, 2 games to 0. I know you love Colin for his ability to play high tide. And we'll get to see that later today.
We'll see that later today. Still